welcome to the SNP 2024 campaign launch. My name is Stuart Hosey, and I'm a retiring MP. The objective of the SNP in every election we contest is to win, and this election is no different. The SNP intend to win the general election in Scotland, and we have, unlike some parties, I'm told, a full slate of candidates and highly motivated activists. We will have a manifesto which is brim full of ideas and, above all else, a real purpose which no one else shares, to take our country to independence. All this applause is great. My ego feels super. You're just stretching the speech out. What we do share, though, with other modern political parties is that we research, test and refine our campaign messages. And the thing about any political message or slogan is it has to be true and it has to be believed. So when we say, when the SNP wins, Scotland wins, when we say we're stronger for Scotland, when we say we're Scotland's voice, these slogans work because they're true and they are believed. So when we say in this campaign the SNP is for Scotland, not only is it true, not only is it believed, it tells people one essential truth. Other parties may pay attention to Scotland now and again. Normally in the run-up to elections, the SNP are for Scotland 100% of the time. Let me put that another way. John Swinney doesn't need to hire a private jet for a tourist day trip to Scotland. He simply has to step outside his own front door. So we will deploy the For Scotland message throughout the entire campaign. It will be deployed in the media, in the social media, on our campaign literature, and by our wonderful candidates, First Minister, MSPs, and above all else, our members and activists. And it is worth reminding ourselves, no matter occasionally what the media might say, not only do we remain Scotland's largest political party by a mile, we are larger than all of our opponents combined. Now, I do want to say a special word about one of our activists, a certain John Swinney. In the few short weeks, and he's become our secret weapon, in the few short weeks since he became party leader and First Minister, he has seen his personal popularity and approval ratings go through the roof while our opponents are languishing. Now, I also want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to all our candidates and their teams throughout Scotland. Since Rishi Sunak made his ill-fated and rather damp announcement that there would be an election, the party has hit the ground running with amazing, vibrant campaigns in every constituency. And I'll let my candidate friends into a secret. I monitor your social media output. And when I see, as I do, large teams of SNP activists throughout the country knocking doors, delivering leaflets, it tells me two things. One, we've got what it takes to win the ground war, and we're already doing what we need to win the air war, so thank you. But this election must motivate our support in every constituency. to ensure that every independent supporter knows that the SNP is not simply for Scotland, but for independence, and that sitting this election out or lending your vote to another party risks setting independence back. That's important, and that's why the material available, the support from our dedicated HQ team, visits from the First Minister, our brilliant social media operation, and events like this are all designed to motivate SNP and independent supporters to vote and to vote SNP. Let's be clear. And I'm looking forward to the affirmation. There is no credible alternative independence vote in this election. But we're not just for Scotland, we're not just for independence, we're also for the EU. We're for a public NHS. We're for affordable housing, and we're for all the people in every community, in every constituency in this country. And we're also for getting rid of this hopeless, hapless, useless Tory government and delivering change. But let's be blunt. Who on earth would vote for the party of Johnson and Sunak and Truss and Brexit and the hideous Rwanda policy? But we cannot risk just changing a blue rosette to a red one and hoping for the best. We need real change, and that only comes with independence. So let's ask the people the question. Does anyone really think that Continuity Keir will deliver real change when he will dispatch his frontbenchers onto the airwaves to talk about privatising the NHS or heaping praise on Margaret Thatcher? Does anyone think that Keir Starmer will deliver real change on austerity, on Brexit, on providing meaningful support to tackle the cost of living crisis? The truth is, Continuity Keir just won't cut it and won't deliver for Scotland. We've had enough Tory policy that we didn't vote for foisted on Scotland. Whether that's delivered in the future by a Tory Prime Minister or Continuity Keir makes no difference. Scotland needs and deserves better. And only the SNP are serious about that. I think that must be obvious from the actions our MPs took in Westminster over the past 5 years. They are for Scotland. Our candidates are for Scotland. We are for Scotland. And I want to see that message on every leaflet, flyer, election address, billboard, advert, T-shirt, badge and poster between now and the 4th of July on election day. So keep on campaigning. It's a simple message. Let's win for Scotland. And now, to keep things ticking along, can I please invite up to the stage activist Charlotte Armitage.
Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to Glasgow. It's fantastic to be here kickstarting our campaign together, and what a pleasure it is to be here alongside our talented candidates and so many dedicated activists who have been put in the graft long before Sunak called this snap election. Friends, we are all aware of the challenge that lies ahead of us in coming weeks. We've all seen the polls, we've all seen the biased media exclusion of our party in debates, but we have one crucial thing in our arsenal that has seen us win so many elections before this one. We have something that should be never underestimated. We have you, each and every one of you here today, and all those across the country who couldn't be here, who turn up, who chap doors, post leaflets, stuff envelopes, and are having conversations on our record with their loved ones. And we are in the fortunate position of being led by one of the most formidable politicians Scotland has ever seen. Friends, when John Swinney stood down from government last year, I tweeted that Scotland is a better place having had his leadership in office for so long. And the people of Scotland clearly agree, as he is the most popular political party leader in the country by a long shot. In comparison, Rishi Sunak believes his party has changed the UK for the better with austerity, Brexit and the cost of living crisis. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer pledges change, but so far the only real change that I can see is the transformation of Thatcherites from blue to red. So you see, we have an advantage here. 10 years ago to this year, the unionist machine refused to believe that we could secure as much support as we did in a referendum. And look how much has changed since then. We proved them wrong then, and we will prove them wrong now. We will win this election, and we will gain our independence. And on that note, I'm delighted to introduce to the stage some of our wonderful candidates: Katie Loudon, Stephen Geffins, Anam Kazar, Jacqueline Cameron, Naz Anise Mia, Samita Knur, Hannah Bardell, and John Nicholson. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, friends. Katie Loudon, representing Rutherglen constituency. My son and his friends are at about the same stage and age I was in 1997. Exam time, thinking about the future, and watching on, not yet able to vote in a general election. I'm going to start by grudgingly giving Starmer a tiny bit of credit here. Because wait for it, a few weeks before that 97 election, Blair said that a new Labour government would not reintroduce tuition fees. They did, 2 months later. As for Starmer's Labour, well, at least his U-turns and abandoned policies are clear for us all to see before a vote has even been cast. So far, we have refusing to bring an end to the abhorrent two-child cap, keeping outsourcing in our NHS, no new EU negotiations or freedom of movement, scrapping climate change investment, no more abolition of universal credit, and where's the nationalisation of public services? And I could go on. All ideas scrunched up into a ball and filed in Sir Keir's round filing cabinet. Some change, eh? These are not the actions of a party of principle. We had a fresh start with the new Scottish Labour MP last year, of course. Did you notice it? It's consisted of staying silent as Sir Keir backed Tory cuts, Brexit and the ongoing and creeping privatisation of our NHS, failing to vote for a ceasefire in Gaza, and abstaining on devolving cost of living powers to Scotland. But it's okay, because this time Labour really mean it. Pinky promise. So thank goodness my children's generation now have an SNP Scottish Government who put the needs of our country first. An SNP government who will continue to fight hard to mitigate Westminster austerity, cuts and chaos, even if that Downing Street podium gets a little nifty redesign. And here's a real promise. SNP MPs will always put Scotland's interests first. Whether that's on demanding action on the cost of living crisis, investment in our NHS, asking for more powers for the Scottish Parliament, or offering a choice over Scotland's future with independence. That's a promise all of our SNP candidates on the stage are standing on, and it's a promise that we will keep. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name's Stephen Gethins. I'm the SNP candidate in Arbroath and Broughty Ferry. Now, it's nice to be here with friends. Friends, I'm here to talk about the subject for the Westminster-based parties is the one that dare not speak its name. Yes, the subject of Brexit. Now, for every political generation and in every parliament, what we should all aspire to do, regardless of the political party you represent, regardless of where you come from, is that you make things that little bit better for those that come after you than you yourself inherited. Nobody can claim that, given the hardest of hard Tory Brexits that's been imposed on Scotland and, yes, elsewhere in the United Kingdom over these past few years. It's left us poorer, it's left us less fair, and at a time of crisis across Europe, it's left us more isolated. Now, I've no idea what's gone so right with a Tory hard Brexit that the Labour Party feel the need to embrace it. I've no idea what went right and what's made them change their minds, because let's think about a few things that people care about. It has made the cost of living crisis worse, putting up food and drink prices, impacting on the poorest in society. It's taken away opportunities from young people, opportunities that for those of us of generations that went before took for granted. That's unforgivable, that we are taking away opportunities that we were able to take for granted. It makes it less easy to take on the climate emergency. Now, across Europe, political parties, even the most extreme right-wing political parties, are now turning away from a policy of leaving the EU because the UK's decision has been so calamitous. Yet, in the UK, you have a main opposition party that has embraced the hardest of hard Brexits. Now, on this stage here, you're seeing future MPs who will provide the main opposition to that, to rejoining the European Union as an independent country and as soon as possible. Thank you, friends.
Good afternoon. I'm Adam Kazar and I'm running to be re-elected as the MP for Airdrie and Shotts, which I've had the privilege of representing since my by-election win in May 2021. I was elected at the age of 28, and whilst I can no longer technically qualify as a young person, I'm 31, I've got grey hair and a really sore back, I often think about what kind of country do we want our young people to live in? A Scotland that is fairer, greener and more prosperous? Or a country ruled by Westminster, where the Prime Minister is the richest man in the House of Commons and the gap between the rich and poor continues to widen? A Scotland that is a global citizen standing shoulder to shoulder with the oppressed? Or a country ruled by Westminster that continues to sell arms to countries who break international humanitarian law? A Scotland Scotland, where our wealth and natural resources are used here in Scotland to help the most vulnerable in our communities. On a country ruled by Westminster, where austerity is at the heart of government, regardless of whether it's the Tories or Labour. A Scotland where decisions are made in Scotland, for Scotland, by the people of Scotland, or a country ruled by Westminster, hundreds of miles away. For 14 years, an entire generation of young people have been struck by Westminster austerity. And don't forget, the 2008 banking crisis was under the last Labour Prime Minister, and the Labour Prime Minister before that dragged us into an illegal war. This has meant that for many young Scots, the doors of opportunity have been slammed shut. In Scotland, with the Scottish National Party, we can choose to take a different path, one that rejects austerity, delivers positive outcomes, and most importantly, offers young people hope. On Thursday, the 4th of July, let's get out there and elect as many SNP MPs as possible, not just for us, but for our future generations. We owe it to them, and we owe it to the future of Scotland.
Well, hello everybody. I'm John Nicholson and I'm standing in Alloa and Grangemouth. There's an election on, you may have noticed. And there's one thing that everybody agrees on, and that is that everybody wants to get rid of the Tories. Probably including Rishi Sunak. Why else? Why else would he call an election 25 points behind? He can't wait to get off to his house in California and leave the whole sorry mess behind him. And if that means sacrificing a few hundred Tory MPs, well, so what? He never liked them much anyway. But what of Labour? Well, let's be clear. Sir Keir Starmer is going to become Prime Minister next month, but will we notice the difference? Limpet close to the Tories in every regard, Sir Keir has dumped every promise he made to become leader. Sir Keir, like Rishi Sunak, now passionately supports Brexit, despite the mess. He's against free student tuition fees. He's against free prescriptions. He no longer believes in returning the utilities to public ownership. He thinks privatisation is a good thing in the NHS. Not all of it, he says, just parts, of course. He refuses to reverse the rape clause. He is against Scotland's right to self-determination. And, like Rishi Sunak, he was disgracefully against an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, even as the slaughter of Palestinians intensified. How disgraceful. He's against the cap of rich bankers' bonuses these days too. Only yesterday, Sir Keir told us that his #1 priority was wealth creation. Really? I'd have thought a Labour leader's #1 priority should be poverty reduction. Well, he'll still be Prime Minister because England is now, like us, thoroughly scunnered with the Tories. He'll win a huge majority in England. Huge majorities lead to arrogant, distant governments. We all remember Blair and Iraq, don't we? Well, I think Scotland has had quite enough of arrogant, distant Westminster governments. Scotland hasn't altered the result of a Westminster election since 1974, we get the governments England's voters choose, and this time they're going to choose Labour. So Scotland needs to elect a strong voice for Scotland, a group of MPs whose only priority isn't what's best for Sir Keir Starmer. We need independently minded MPs who will only do what's best for Scotland. SNP MPs who will stand up to Sir Keir, the most right-wing, conservative Labour leader of my lifetime. For England's voters, it's a terrible choice. Rishi or Sir Keir. Brexit or Brexit. Privatisation or privatisation. Sewage in their rivers or more sewage in their rivers. Big bankers' bonuses or even bigger bankers' bonuses. But here in Scotland, we have a better choice. We can control our own destiny, not make do, not put up, not listen to predictions of a false Labour dawn. We can choose to make Scotland an independent country back in the heart of Europe, and we owe that to ourselves and to our future generations.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Cameron, and I'm the SNP candidate for Paisley and Renfrewshire South. The bedrock of a socially just and compassionate society is how it treats its children. But right now here in broken Brexit Britain, there are more than 4.3 million children living in poverty. Statistics don't tell the human stories behind that number. That's children sitting in schools experiencing pangs of hunger, children who don't have the proper clothes or shoes for winter weather, and children returning to cold homes because their parents can't afford to heat it. That is simply unacceptable in a rich nation. The Child Poverty Action Group are clear that the two-child limit is a key driver of child poverty, and that is a political choice, but it's not Scotland's choice. Here in Scotland, we're forging a different path, and I was never prouder of our First Minister John Swinney when he made that commitment not to reduce poverty, not to tackle poverty, but to eradicate poverty. A bold statement, but here in Scotland, we've already made bold actions to achieve that goal. When a baby is born in Scotland, the parents receive the baby box, essential items to ensure every baby in Scotland has the best start in life. The Best Start grant, Best Start foods, policies that make sure children are healthy and nurtured in the early years of their life. The Child Poverty Action Group are also clear that Westminster welfare reform over the past 10 years has directly impacted children. That's why here in Scotland, SNP policies are mitigating that wherever we can. The Scottish Child Payment, lifting 60,000 children out of poverty. Scotland is the only nation in the UK providing this support, demonstrating that when it comes to child poverty, we are backing up our bold ambition with action, not rhetoric. So what is the human story behind those numbers and those SNP policies? It means parents getting support with early learning and childcare, children getting breakfast at their breakfast clubs, a free school meal, wearing a uniform just like their peers, using the free bus pass to go and meet their friends, and, in short, given the same chances that every child should have. Child poverty affects a child's health, their well-being and their future chances in life. Our First Minister has made a commitment to eradicate it. And I and my fellow candidates, if we're elected, will take that message to whichever government is in Westminster and let them know that it's time for them to follow our lead, to end austerity measures and to create a society where all children thrive. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Naz and I'm the SNP candidate for Dunfermline and Dollar. All of us here today are united under the positive and just vision our First Minister John Swinney has for our country. Serious times call for serious leadership, and that's at every level. We must all lead too now. We have to be united by that determination to make this country reach its potential as a happier, fairer and wealthier country, an independent country. And that's what unites us deep down when you take away the titles MP, MSP, councillor, office bearer. Deep down all we are is independence activists. Grassroots activism is where I come from. I wasn't always involved in campaign meetings and strategy phone calls and multiple WhatsApp groups. I was a guy that used to go away. I was a guy that used to just go away with my leaflets and get them delivered. And for me, it's time to focus on those basics, bread and butter activism, get out, campaign, and that's where politics started for a lot of us, bringing that positive message to the people of Scotland. Listen, the other parties have got a lot. They've got a lot of money from their secret donors. They've got the media behind them, trashing us and spinning their narrative. And in Scotland, they've even got each other, the coalition. We know the rule. It's anything but the SNP. It's anything but independence. The lines are blurred, and I've even heard stories that they hold hands and play happy families and skip through the corridors of Holyrood. The one thing that they don't have is what we have. We're driven by hope. We're driven by belief and a common cause of an independent Scotland. So it's time to work and do what we do best. We win elections. We're the SNP. We get out, we campaign, we face the public, we answer questions and we turn voters. They say the party's in trouble. They say the indie movement's dying. I don't see that. I look around the country and I see stalls. I see people campaigning morning till night. I see yellow and I see saltires everywhere. When I look at the party, I see strength, I see resilience, I see experience and I see winners. And all of us who stand in this election do so today because we stand on the shoulder of giants who came before us. And I think it's important to remember that people who gave everything towards that vision who aren't here today. Scotland needs SNP MPs who will put Scotland first in a Westminster Parliament that always puts Scotland last, and that's why all of us have to do what we do. It's going to get rough, it's going to get messy, and we have to look after each other, support each other, and over the next few weeks we've got to stay strong, work hard, and listen, we've got to throw everything at this campaign. And wherever you are in the morning of 5th of July, wherever your count is, you walk out with your heads held high. Whatever the result, you walk out together with your team, knowing that you worked for and you fought hard for what we believe in, an independent Scotland.
Friends, the real-term cuts to Scottish Government's budget by Westminster is having severe consequences across all local authorities. At a recent Edinburgh Council meeting, the Tory leader commented he didn't understand why we were overreaching in what he described as odd communist thinking around food poverty. And now I'm going to quote him saying, "Food is much cheaper now than it's ever been." The first question I had was, where do you shop and how can I access this? But B, how far removed from reality are you? People are genuinely struggling to feed their families. It's an insult to all working people to deny their reality and their struggles. Our mission to eradicate child poverty is the right one. The domino effect of not doing something will have greater consequences in the future that we just can't comprehend. Now is the time to accelerate our efforts. We have a clear fight at our hands for Scotland, for the next generation. Friends, my name is Simita Kumar, and I am honoured to be a Westminster candidate for Edinburgh South. Thank you.
afternoon, folks. I'm Hannah Bardell, the SNP candidate for the Livingston constituency. Now, having just entered into a union of my own this week, I've got my wife here on my honeymoon. I hope you're all enjoying yourselves. But it got me thinking about the other union that we're all currently part of. I've spent nearly a decade at Westminster, along with my colleagues, representing the Livingston constituency that I grew up in. And I've seen how poorly it serves not just my constituents, not just Scotland, but all of the nations in the UK. And I've thought a lot about the values I hold and what I could bring to this new partnership that I've just entered into. Because when you're entering into the union of marriage and taking your vows, vows of equality, respect, and above all, the ability to stand on your own and make decisions for yourself, you realise how vital they are to the success of any partnership. And I think if you ask most folk in England, or indeed the other nations of the UK, should Scotland be allowed to make decisions for themselves and be an independent nation, I think most of them would agree. Because the reality is the strong and deep ties of friendship between the nations of the UK are not going to change. We in Scotland who support independence don't want separation, we want self-determination. And we're not... Contrary to popular belief, we're not trying to break up Britain. We want to stand shoulder to shoulder with the other nations of these islands as equal and independent partners who can hold each other to account, but can also work together, just as other European and global independent nations do. So why is there so much fear in the Westminster establishment about Scottish independence? And why do they continue to reject Scotland's democratic and legitimate right to decide what future we want? The truth is, Westminster only serves itself. A Westminster that gave us contaminated blood scandal, the Post Office Horizon scandal, the Primados scandal, and is complicit in dropping bombs on innocent Palestinian people. It's a Westminster that has members of Putin's inner circle amongst its lawmakers and the Lords. Lords who are unelected or can't be thrown out for bad or illegal behaviour. Lords whose unelected members increase while the number of elected MPs, particularly our MPs in Scotland, decrease. A Westminster system that aids and abets corruption. A system that people in the UK are so wary of and weary with that some parties can't even field candidates. And good people who want to stay and serve their constituencies are leaving because it's a place so devoid of honesty and integrity and it no longer feels safe. Westminster doesn't serve Scotland or anyone else. Everyone deserves Scotland, but Scotland has the clear opportunity to lead from the front, to show our near neighbours that with independence and a Scotland back in Europe, a much brighter future is possible. I feel strongly that an independent nation, Scotland can be rich in energy and ideas, managing our own resources and relationships. Scotland can lead on the recalibration and the renegotiation of our position within the EU and with those other nations. In the words of the writer Arthur Herman, Scotland invented the modern world. Now it's time, as an independent nation, that we work alongside our neighbours and friends, near and far, for greater peace and prosperity, protecting our citizens from poverty and austerity, and ensuring everyone in our nation and in the nations around us can flourish and succeed.
Friends, my name is Ellie Keplinger. I'm an activist based here in Glasgow. And when I tell you, it is an honour and a privilege to share the stage with this group of incredible candidates. I really feel like I'm standing in front of the Avengers, honestly. If anyone is going to bring the progressive, independent country that we all know we deserve, it's this lot right here. So know that young people have the capacity to make or break any election, whether it's local, general, or even at the Holyrood level. But friends, we are in a crisis of disinterest today. I'm going to tell you a fun fact. In 2019, young people under the age of 25, even she's shocked, and I've not even got there yet. Less than 50% of the young people in the UK under the age of 25 turned out to vote. I'm going to say that again. Less than half of the young people in the UK under the age of 25 turned out to vote. That's a massive, untapped potential that we have the capacity to connect with. Now, I want to give a couple of shout-outs here. So I am a proud member of the Young Scots for Independence. We've just launched an amazing... We've just launched an incredible TikTok campaign that's going really well. I also, so shout out to the team over there, I also partner with Sadie Matthews in the front here to run Hot Girl Politics, which is another TikTok account where we bring the sexy back into politics. Not that it ever left, of course, if you've ever seen John Swinney. I'm joking, but... But I really want to shout out the digital team that we've got here, as well within the party HQ. At the end of the day, we are experts at what we do. We have been in government in Scotland for 17 years. And when you think about what we have achieved in that time, free bus passes for under 22s, free tuition for those who aspire to go to university. Find me another country in the world who guarantees that for their young people. We've lifted 100,000 children out of poverty, and we have a responsibility to our generation to communicate those achievements to that untapped potential that lies before us. So, friends, with that incredible experience, I want to introduce another one of our party's heavyweights. He is a popular guy down in Westminster, and he's done incredible things to, again, protect our country's interests. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Stephen Flynn.
Never been called an Avenger before. I have been called a nationalist. And us nationalists at this general election, we are going to win Glasgow. And as we go into this campaign, let's do so with hope in our heart and with confidence in our stride. Because we have much to be confident about. And we start in that regard with our record. Because it is the SNP that provided the baby box. 2.5 days a week of free childcare. 100,000 children out of poverty. Free university tuition. Free bus passes for our young people. A nationalised rail service, no peak fares, a nationalised water service. %40 more new houses than in England, 70% more new houses than in Wales, and not a single day lost to strikes in our NHS. Now, friends, we have much to be proud of All of that and so much more. But that is both the past and the present. And this general election is very much about the future. And for so many people on these isles, the overwhelming majority of people in England, they have no choice at all. As Peter Kunak, one of the founders of Deering, you might have heard of them. Rishi Sunak knows all about their song because he listened to it belting into his ears on Downing Street just the other week. He said in the last 48 hours that this isn't an election. This is simply a changing of the guard. And that's precisely what this election is. Because what we have in Westminster is a status quo. It's a desire, as Keir Starmer says, for stability. Well, I'll tell you what that stability means. It means £18 billion worth of cuts to our public services. It means no access to the European single market of over 500 million people. It means no freedom of movement. It means walking back and watering down our net zero potential. It means privatisation of our NHS. It means denying the people of Scotland their right to democratically choose their own future. Friends, we deserve so much more. Scotland deserves so much more. And that is why all of us on this stage and all of you in this room are for Scotland. It's why we always put Scotland's interests first. Because those aren't just slogans. Those are what we believe. And that's important because we believe in better. We believe in a nation where we can invest in our future. Invest in our schools, in our transport, in our health service. We believe in a future that keeps that health service free at the point of use and free from private hands. We believe in a future where our young people can travel freely across the European Union and people who live in the European Union can travel freely in Scotland. We believe in a future where when those people come to work in Scotland, they are as welcome now as they will be in the future because they are the drivers, they are the glue that holds together our public services. They are the people that will drive the economic growth that our plethora of fantastic businesses want to deliver. Friends, you only get that future. You only get people arguing the case for that future if you vote SNP at the general election on the 4th of July. And friends, there's one other thing which is of incredible importance to me, given my status as the candidate for Aberdeen South at this election, and that, of course, is energy. Because for decades, Westminster has squandered Scotland's energy potential. 450 billion has walked its way from Scotland's northeast to the UK Treasury, and what do we get in return? Well, let's not allow that to happen again. Let's make sure that our energy potential is in Scotland's hands. Let's not allow the Labour Party to walk away from their £28 billion commitment. Let's force them to stick to it. Let's not allow Scotland's offshore wind potential to be ruined. Let's make sure it delivers, not just for business, but for communities, for households and their bills. Let's make sure that we develop and create tens of thousands of jobs to power Scotland's economy for the future. Let's not allow the Labour Party to scrap 100,000 jobs in Scotland at this general election. The prize, friends, the prize is far too big to simply give away to the Westminster parties. Friends, the importance of voting SNP in the general election on Independence Day is all too clear to all of us. Now, when I joined the Scottish National Party, I didn't do so because it was easy. I didn't do so because someone told me Scotland will be independent tomorrow. I did so because I believe in something. I believe in better. And you know, the only way that all of us in this room can predict the future is to create it. And the only way we can create it is by working together and making sure that the SNP wins. Because when the SNP wins, Scotland wins. So friends, over the weeks to come, let's chat every door. Let's speak to as many people as we possibly can. And let's make sure that everyone right across the length and breadth of our nation knows that we are for Scotland. We will always put Scotland first. And friends, let's win together. Thank you.
Friends, thank you. It is wonderful to be all together today and to be in this room filled to the brim as it is with you all. I want to begin by thanking today's contributors. I have no doubt that, like me, you have listened and you are feeling deeply inspired by the contributions that they have made. What a wealth of talent we have in our party. I hope and I expect that, like me, you are also feeling geared up for the work that we have ahead of us now between today and the 4th of July at 10 p.m. I know that all of you and the scores of us who are not here today will do exactly as Stephen said, work door to door, street to street, earning and re-earning the support of the people of Scotland. It's what we've always done, and it's what we will do now. Now, it was just 4 weeks ago that I first had the privilege of introducing our next speaker as he launched his leadership bid at a social enterprise in Edinburgh. And as I did that, I reflected on what I considered to be the overriding sense of duty that I knew that he carried as he considered taking on this central role. And in doing that, I reflected on the words of the man himself. Earlier that week, he had been asked by the media if he was considering going forward for the leadership of our party. And he replied in a usual calm, quiet manner that he was giving very serious consideration to what was best for his family, for our party, and for our country. And that, for me, it was instructive, speaking to his values, his thoughtfulness, and to that overriding sense of duty, which I know he carries. Now, 4 weeks later, he is leading from the front, working to take both our party record, of which we are so proud, together with our hopeful message of the future, and doing that into every community in this country that we love. And as I said 4 weeks ago, to many of us, he's a friend, a mentor, a colleague, a boss. To us all, and to the Scottish National Party, he is among the most steadfast, loyal, and unstinting advocates of the furtherance of Scotland's interests and of Scotland's cause, to which we dedicate ourselves. Friends, please show your appreciation for the leader of the Scottish National Party and First Minister of Scotland, John Swinney.
Thank you very much, Mary. Friends, I think it's fair to say that neither you nor I really expected 4 weeks ago that I would be standing here as leader of the Scottish National Party and the First Minister of Scotland. But I hope it is for you, as it is for me, the loveliest of surprises. I am deeply honoured to be leading our party and serving Scotland as First Minister. If that was enough of a surprise, in truth, I didn't really expect that I would be leading the SNP into an election campaign within 2 weeks of becoming party leader. But here we are, and we are ready to make the case for Scotland. Polling Day, of course, is on the 4th of July, also known, of course, as Independence Day by our American friends. It's a really good day for Scotland to follow suit. In these next few weeks, we need to set out our case to the people of Scotland with energy, optimism and hope. And it's the people of Scotland that I want to speak to directly today as we set out our message. To set out why voting SNP will lead to a better country and a better future for you and your family. And for the people in this room and the wider SNP, it will then be up to you to take our positive, hopeful vision of how we can build a better Scotland to every community in our country. You are the greatest asset any party could have. Indeed, you are this party. So I need you to get out there and campaign like never before. And knowing you like I do, I know that you are up for this. This election is the biggest challenge the SNP has had for years. That may feel daunting, but it's a good thing. The voters are right to remind us never to take anything for granted. Right to make us work even harder for them, and right, to make us constantly earn and re-earn their trust. So here today, at our first major party gathering since I became leader of this party, let me make this commitment to the people of Scotland. I am here to serve you all. I am here to work hard to win your trust and your confidence. I am here to give everything I have to secure the best future for our country. That process starts with listening. And this is what most people in Scotland are telling us. They want rid of this disastrous, chaotic Tory government. They want a party. They want a party that's laser focused on their concerns. A party that's going to help them and their families live happier, healthier lives. In other words, they want a party that puts their interests first. They want a party that puts Scotland's interests first. And for the SNP, as the party of independence, there is a clear task they have set for us: to demonstrate why achieving independence is relevant and indeed vital to their core concerns. So let me teach each of those in turn. Removing the Tory government, putting Scotland's interests first, and winning the decision-making powers that come with independence. Firstly, getting rid of the Tories. Never has a party demonstrated why they should be removed from office more than Rishi Sunak's Tory party. The latest wheeze in their desperate struggle for survival is to bring back national service. The national service the SNP is going to perform for Scotland is to remove this Tory government from office. In Scotland, the SNP is the challenger in every single Tory-held seat. So the electoral maths is clear. If you want Rishi Sunak out of Downing Street, vote for the Scottish National Party. To put it bluntly, across the UK, the Tories are on course for a huge defeat, a wipeout. Voters in England are going to send them packing. That is not in doubt. And that begs the question, what kind of change, if any, is that going to mean at Westminster? Now, I'm not saying that Labour are exactly the same as the Tories. They're not. But they are giving an awfully good impression of them. The only substantive change Labour seem to be offering is to change their own principles. And let me give you one really telling and worrying example. Their health spokesman, Wes Streeting, the man who in a few weeks' time will be the UK Government's Health Secretary, last week set out his plans for the NHS. He criticised the Tories on the issue of the NHS and the private sector. Fair enough, you might say. Bad news. He was not criticising the Tories for using the private sector too much. He was criticising the Tories for not using the private sector enough. He went on to say he wanted to go further than Tony Blair's New Labour. And he wrote, "I want the NHS to form partnerships with the private sector that goes beyond just hospitals." That sounds an awful lot like creeping privatisation of the NHS to me. Let me be absolutely crystal clear. The SNP rejects privatisation of the NHS, whether that is Tory privatisation or Labour privatisation. is why it matters to Scotland. In another interview, the very same spokesman also said this: all roads lead back to Westminster, because even though this is devolved, decisions taken in Westminster have an impact on the NHS across the whole country. If there is creeping privatisation of the NHS, or if Labour do not increase investment in the NHS in England, our precious National Health Service faces a very bleak future. That's why I'm asking people in Scotland to unite on July the 4th and vote SNP to protect Scotland's National Health Service. Labour's tack to the right is designed to win votes in England. They don't seem to care too much about Scotland, though. They think Scotland's in the bag. What other explanation could there be to allow them to select a candidate who said this about criminal people smugglers? And I quote, "Why don't you send the smuggler gangs and put them on the barge that has been set aside for asylum seekers and ship the barge up to the north of Scotland? Who cares?" Well, I'll tell you who cares. The SNP cares. That's who cares. With Labour certain to enter office with MPs who don't care about Scotland, people in this country know, and they know this for absolute certainty, SNP MPs will always put the interests of the people of Scotland first. So let me now set out what putting Scotland's interests first actually means. In the few weeks I've been First Minister, I've made it pretty plain we must be focused on people's top concerns. I'm proud of what we have done in government. We're helping with the cost of living through free prescriptions, the abolition of university tuition fees and free bus travel for under-22s. In our NHS, Scotland has the best performing core A&E units in the United Kingdom for 9 years. On the economy, under the SNP, Scotland has had faster economic growth per head than the UK. On housing, under the SNP, Scotland has 40% more affordable homes per head than in England and over 70% more than in Wales. We've introduced the Scottish Child Payment. In our primary schools, there are record levels of literacy and numeracy. We've massively increased renewable energy and we're already almost halfway to net zero. Your SNP government has transformed lives in Scotland and we have a record to be proud of. So yes, we have been working hard, but I'd be the first to recognise we've got to do more to re-earn trust. That means more action. That's the task I've set my government. To help more with the cost of living, we're extending all-day off-peak rail fares. In the health service, we're investing £300 million over the next 3 years to drive down waiting times. Through our social security powers, we're keeping an estimated 100,000 children in Scotland out of poverty. And as junior doctors in England call another strike, Scotland is the only part of the United Kingdom to avoid NHS strike action by investing in pay deals for staff. So at this election, I'm asking you to vote for the SNP because we are focused on your top priorities, like the cost of living and the National Health Service. I ask you to vote SNP because we will always put Scotland's interests first. that brings me to independence. People want us to demonstrate the relevance of independence to their lives. If we don't, then we're not likely to get much of a hearing in the midst of a cost of living crisis, and to be frank, nor would we deserve to. So when we talk about independence, we need to demonstrate again and again and again that we're talking about people's core concerns, like raising living standards and protecting the National Health Service. That laser-like focus on the daily concerns of people is our guiding star. Now, there are some people telling me to forget about independence at this election. But you know what? After looking at Sir Keir Starmer's serial U-turns in the pursuit of power, I think people are crying out for political leadership that sticks to its principles. For leaders who argue for what they actually believe in. And I passionately believe independence is the best opportunity we have to build a more prosperous and a fairer country. My belief, of course, is not nearly enough. People are rightly looking for evidence that independence will boost living standards, protect the NHS, help us to build more houses and tackle the climate emergency. So here is the evidence. Westminster decision-making has meant austerity, Brexit, and a cost-of-living crisis being imposed on Scotland. Austerity from the Conservative government has been a curse that is inflicting significant damage on the NHS, on housing, and on other public services. Brexit, alone, a product of Westminster decision-making, has wiped billions from the Scottish economy compared to EU membership. And it's pushed up food, mortgages and other household costs. Now, Labour knows all of this. Sir Keir Starmer is an intelligent man. He knows this is the effect of austerity and Brexit. But he's still willing to impose all that damage on Scotland, whatever the cost, so that he can win power. I'm sorry, but that's quite simply unforgivable. It doesn't have to be that way. I've set out the benefits of taking decisions in Scotland for Scotland with the current powers of the Scottish Parliament. If we look at independent European countries similar to Scotland, like Denmark, Norway and Ireland, with full powers, we can see what is possible. Those countries are wealthier than the UK. They are fairer with greater equality. They have higher productivity and lower poverty. With all Scotland's resources, all our incredible renewables potential, all our brilliant universities, our industries, and above all, our people with all their talents, then why not Scotland? I can no more turn my back on that evidence than I can on my core political beliefs. No one is suggesting that we can match that performance overnight. But given the UK is moving so badly in the wrong direction, I would be failing in my duty to guide and nurture our country if I did not set out what I believe is a better future for Scotland. So at this election, my priority is to protect Scotland. Let's ensure the decade of destructive decisions at Westminster is never again visited upon the Scottish people. I ask people to vote SNP so that decisions can be made in Scotland for Scotland. Let me finish by setting out what my leadership is all about. I believe in bringing people together. 3 weeks in, I've already done that in this wonderful party of ours. I believe in a politics of persuasion, but if that is not possible, a politics of respectful disagreement. I believe in our wonderful, diverse, inspiring country, that everyone should have a chance to get on in life, that we will achieve more for the common good if we draw together the talent that lives in all of our communities. At this election, it is those principles that will guide my approach. So I'm asking people to vote SNP to remove the Tories from government. I'm asking people to vote SNP to put Scotland's interests first. I'm asking you to work with me in a strong, unified team to encourage people to vote for a future made in Scotland for Scotland. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. Thank you all very much. Now, we're going to, as at these events where we set out our stall, I'll be open to questions from the media. So we're going to take some questions from media organisations that are here. So we'll just take them one by one. And given the lights here, I'm not altogether sure where the media are, but I shall read out the names I've got in front of me. So first of all, James Cook from BBC Network. James?
Thanks very much, First Minister. The answer is you've put us right at the back. I'm over here. You've said that leaving a 50-year-old union with the EU has wiped billions from the economy. Why would leaving a 300-year-old union with England not be even worse? No. Before we go any further, right? Before we go any further, I just said I believe in open debate and respectful disagreement, right? So for this bit of the gathering, no questions are to be applauded or heckled, and none of my answers are to be applauded or heckled. Okay, so it's fair rules for everybody. James, would you start again, please? And you'll be heard in silence, James. Well, OK, that's kind of you, First Minister. It struck me as quite a reasonable question, if I'm honest with you. There seems an obvious logic, and I'm interested to hear your answer. So let me just repeat it. You've said that leaving a 50-year-old union with the EU has wiped billions from the economy. Why would leaving a 300-year-old union with England not be worse?
The answer is that what independence enables us to do is to take the decisions that are important and relevant to enhancing the lives of people in Scotland. And part of that involves taking sensible decisions about how you cooperate with your neighbours. So if I make the comparison with Brexit, I can't speak to a company in Scotland today that tells me the trading arrangements between the United Kingdom and Brexit have been enhanced by the negotiations that have been undertaken. They have in fact been damaged. So it's not actually the process of taking that decision to establish Scotland as an independent country, it's the decisions you take as a consequence. And if you're interested in having an outward-facing economy that trades with your neighbours effectively and openly, that seeks cooperation and collaboration with your neighbours, as countless European countries do already. You know, the European Union trades freely and happily and has all sorts of cooperation over the many borders that exist between individual European countries. I don't see why that opportunity does not exist for an independent Scotland in relation to our next nearest neighbour, which should be England, and then also in the trading partners in the European Union with whom we would want to be associated and linked as a full member of the European Union. So that's the difference. Right, Phil Sim from BBC Scotland.
Thank you. I know you'd prefer to speak about the principles of independence rather than the process, but your party's put it front and centre in successive election campaigns and won a lot of seats, but come no closer to actually delivering. So just wondering what is different this time and how can you actually move things closer?
Well, I think the whole thing comes down to what's the outcome and what's the result of the election. To what extent do people in Scotland empower the Scottish National Party to deliver independence? And because that's essential in forcing democratic decision-making within the United Kingdom. Now, currently, we have an impasse. We've got a United Kingdom government that is sitting impervious to the democratic wishes and aspirations of the people of Scotland. And I don't think that's sustainable in a democracy, that should be enabled. So the United Kingdom government is the government that's got the problem here because they're acting in an anti-democratic fashion. And the people of Scotland can take that posturing out of the hands of the UK government by empowering the Scottish National Party and empowering the people of Scotland to make progress on the agenda for independence. We'll come to Skye now. Darren McCaffrey.
Yeah, very good afternoon, John. I'm over here. Thank you. Today, the SNP have accused Keir Starmer of directly harming Scotland with his pledge to reduce migration. But surely, as the Scottish National Party, you would agree with the sentiment that businesses should put the priority of hiring Scots first, that Scots should be front of the queue when it comes to jobs here in Scotland. And second of all, you've been quite honest and frank, actually, about some of the difficulties the SNP are going to face during this election. But what does winning look like for the SNP in this election? Are you, as Stuart Hosey suggested, going to be the largest political party by a country mile still on July 4th?
Thanks, Dan. On the first question about migration, one of the other things that crops up in all my conversations with business is that they are short of people. So, the unemployment data in Scotland today is very, very low. It's been low for some considerable number of years. We are in a situation where businesses are struggling to find employees to fill the vacancies that they have got. We have in our country a significant issue. I've been very open about this with Parliament, about handling reducing the number of delayed discharges in our hospitals. But of course, to do that, you need to have enough people providing social care packages in the community, and we're short of social care workers in our community. We lost tens of thousands of these good people when Brexit came along, and they all went back to their own countries and their own homes, and they were helping us out here in the Scottish economy. So the biggest economic threat to Scotland is the current hostility towards migration that we have in the United Kingdom. That is absolutely... Now, I said no applause. However much you like it. We could have applause at the end. But so the migration issue is and if you look at any analysis about economic growth and economic opportunity, population growth is one of the most significant drivers of economic growth. All the economic analysis says that. So we're literally turning off economic opportunity as a consequence of the stance on migration. And then in relation to your second part of your question, Darren, about what's the outcome like for the SNP? Well, I want the SNP to be the largest party in Scotland after this election, and I want to make sure as many of these fine people behind me are elected to do exactly that. Right, Alex Thompson from Channel 4. Alex.
Good afternoon, First Minister. Why are Labour doing so well in Scotland?
Well, there's clearly, I think there's two things that are probably kicking about just now. There has been, the SNP has faced its difficulties. That's why I'm here, and we're getting out of those difficulties, and we're on the front foot. I've had a fabulous couple of weeks around the country with very, very energetic campaign teams out and about around the country. I visited 6 of them yesterday, all of them in the northeast of Scotland, all of them very, very dynamic in taking forward our message. And the second thing that's happened is that I think people have not really been engaged in the hard choices of this election. And in the hard choices of this election, and I was raising one of these on Friday, we've had prolonged austerity from the Conservative government. And that needs to come to an end. I made it clear on Friday, I believe that's got to come to an end. But as I look at the Labour Party has committed not to increase income tax, not to increase corporation tax, not to increase national insurance, not to increase VAT. They've committed to tight borrowing limits, and they've committed to tight fiscal spending envelopes. And the IFS, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, tell us that for all that to happen, £18 billion worth of public spending cuts need to happen. Now, I intend to make sure everybody in Scotland knows that will be the consequence of a Labour government between now and the 4th of July, because we can't cope with any more austerity. So my answer, Alex, on my second part of my answer to your question, is that people don't quite know what the Labour Party is actually promising, but I'm going to make sure they do by the 4th of July. Right, now remember, Alan Jasinski from Global. Alan?
Yep, hi. Stuart Hosey said there is no credible alternative independence vote. What would your message be to supporters of Alex Salmond's party who say that's not true?
I think it's pretty obvious, and history tells us this, that Scotland only does well when the SNP does well. And I would just say to people, if you're interested in Scottish independence, don't be distracted. Vote for the SNP, because we're the party of independence and we'll deliver it. Right, Paul Hutchin from the Daily Record. Paul?
First Minister, 2 things. What's your reaction to the Sunday Times story this morning on £450 million of funds that you'll have to give back to the EU? And secondly, the former SNP Chief Executive Peter Murrell was charged recently in connection with embezzlement of party funds. How can party members and SNP donors have faith and confidence that the money they give to the SNP, their hard-earned money, is spent properly?
First thing, Paul, on the Sunday Times story, clearly the EU funding programmes have not reached their conclusion. They'll reach their conclusion over probably the next 12 to 18 months. My expectation would be that almost all of that funding that you're talking about will be spent and essentially delivered as a consequence of the EU programme. So the Sunday Times story this morning, it takes a snapshot of a programme that has not reached its completion yet, and my expectation would be when it reaches its completion, almost all of that expenditure will be spent. On the second point about party funding, all I would say to party members and to donors is that I give them my personal assurance that every penny raised for the Scottish National Party will be spent effectively and appropriately on the Scottish National Party election campaign and on winning independence. From the FT, Simeon Kerr.
Thank you, First Minister. Could you please clarify the SNP's position regarding North Sea oil and gas? Do you think that there should be new, fresh exploration, or is that actually inconsistent with your long-term net zero goals? Thank you.
Well, I think what we've got to do is we've got to take an approach that ensures that we work with the oil and gas sector on our journey towards net zero, that we consider at all times the implications of any fossil fuel activity on our long-term activities in relation to net zero. But what I recognise is that the North Sea oil and gas sector has got to be fiscally sustainable for 2 reasons. One, to support itself in the current context, but also to be able to deliver the transition to net zero, where we need the oil and gas sector to be part of that process of transition. So the Scottish National Party wants to work closely with the oil and gas sector to ensure that we take an approach on oil and gas activity that is compatible with our journey to net zero, but we do it in a fashion that delivers fiscal sustainability for the sector. Libby Brooks from The Guardian.
Thank you. When Keir Starmer was visiting Greenock last Friday, he talked about the damaging conflicts that there have been ongoing between the UK and Scottish governments, and he pledged to improve that relationship should he become Prime Minister. Do you commit to working with him on that and that toxicity that we've seen, even if, as he suggests, it ends up denting support for independence?
Well, I've been engaged in intergovernmental relations with the UK government for many years, and I've had many occasions where that has been successful and constructive, and many where it's been difficult and we've not been able to get agreement. But for most of the time, that's been a reasonably respectful environment. I would actually say that my experience of the Brown government, the Cameron and Clegg government, the following Cameron government and the Theresa May governments were generally, on issues that affected people's lives, pretty constructive. I have to say, I was part of those discussions, and I thought generally it was a pretty constructive environment. After the arrival of Boris Johnson, intergovernmental relationships I would essentially describe as disrespectful. We didn't change, they did. So if Sir Keir Starmer is saying, should he become Prime Minister, that he's keen to have a serious, mature, respectful engagement with the Scottish Government, he'll have absolutely no issues with me, because I think people know me well enough to know I'm a serious player when it comes to these negotiations. I did, after all, manage to negotiate a fiscal framework which was enormously beneficial for Scotland. So I'm interested in serious negotiation. But I also know what disrespectful relationships look like, and they've existed since Boris Johnson walked into 10 Downing Street. Lewis Mackenzie from The Sun.
Thank you, First Minister. Hamza Yousaf had spoken about launching into talks on independence if the SNP was to win the most seats in Scotland. You've spoken about your sort of aim to win the most seats in Scotland. Would you, if the SNP wins the most seats in Scotland, will you take that as a direct mandate to begin negotiations on independence, or would you request the powers to hold a referendum in that case?
Well, I would always want to have the powers to hold a referendum, Lewis, because I recognise that the referendum route is the most authoritative, definitive route for the people of Scotland to be asked that question. I think it was well established in 2014, so that's what I would want to ensure was the case. So that would be the purpose of my discussions with the United Kingdom, to make sure people had that democratic choice. And as I said in my answer, one of my earlier answers, the unwillingness of the UK government to engage on that question is a significant obstacle to what we are trying to do. But I would want to engage in those discussions. I'd want to engage in those discussions early, and I'd want to make sure that we had the opportunity to have that referendum so that people could make a choice on the important question of independence. And I think it's a fundamentally democratic argument. Can I now take David Ball from the Scotsman? David?
Thanks very much. Going back to the oil and gas question, can you just explain a little bit why you're sort of rethinking that position? Is it to do with vote winning in the North East? And can you guarantee that the Scottish Government's energy strategy, which is already delayed, will be produced and voters will get to see it before the election?
Well, on the last point, David, as you would see from the letter that I published on Tuesday from the Permanent Secretary to the Scottish Government, there are a whole range of different government publications which I committed to publish before the summer recess, which I'm not going to be able to publish because of the pre-election guidance that comes into place, which obliges us to ensure that we don't take any actions as a government that influence the outcome of the election. Documents such as the energy strategy will not be able to be published because they essentially deal with reserved issues. So on that question, we will not be able to publish that document in that timescale. On the wider question of oil and gas, I'm interested in doing two things. I'm interested in achieving net zero, but I'm also interested in doing that in a way that does not cause economic damage to the economy of Scotland and particularly to the northeast of Scotland. So that has to be a managed transition to ensure that we undertake that transition as effectively as we possibly can, minimising any economic damage as a consequence of a transition that has got to be made. Can I come to James Walker from the National?
Thank you, First Minister. I'd like to go back to Keir Starmer's pledge to cut net migration to the UK. What do you think about his rhetoric, the control our borders, British jobs for British people-esque rhetoric?
I think it's playing to a particular audience, and it's not one that exists in Scotland. That's what I think about it. And I don't think it's discussion, I don't think it's language that helps us, because as I've mapped out in my earlier answer, all of the issues of population growth are central to how we perform as an economy. And I want the Scottish economy to thrive. I want there to be more economic opportunity. I want to make it possible to address the difficulties and the challenges that business face. But when a business sits in front of me and says, we can't recruit enough staff, I'm kind of limited in what I can say to them, because we're at almost full employment, we've got very low unemployment, and we don't have other people who can contribute. But migration helps you. That's how economies grow. So I don't think the language helps us, either in terms of our view of the world or also in terms of the economic opportunity. Can I now come to Jess North from the Daily Mail? Jess?
Hi, First Minister. I just wanted to reference a poll that came out this morning. 59% of Scots think that the independence argument has not moved on since 2014. Now, seeing as all of your candidates have put independence front and centre, I'm wondering what more they could say that hasn't already been said to convince the general public. And also, your opponents are calling this a desperate relaunch. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the second or the third campaign launch that your party's had this year?
Well, let me just talk about the first point. I think what I've tried to do so far in this election campaign is to illustrate, and this is the direct answer to your question, Jess, about the arguments for independence. What I've been trying to do over the last couple of weeks is to relate independence to the everyday lives of people in Scotland. So let's look at the three decisions I've highlighted today, or the three factors: austerity, Brexit, and the cost of living. Austerity, cuts to public spending, challenges in having enough money for our health service to adequately meet the needs of the population. Brexit, every company finding it difficult to do trade with Europe as a consequence of what's happened. Cost of living, every household suffering because of hyperinflation presided over by a government in the United Kingdom that got it all wrong. Higher interest rates because of Liz Truss's gamble with the markets and all the rest of it. ABC, austerity, Brexit, cost of living, all of that has been inflicted on Scotland by a Westminster government, and it doesn't have to be like that, because we could take our own decisions to prioritise the choices and the investments necessary for Scotland, as we have done, about eradicating child poverty with the child payment, or early learning and childcare, where we've doubled the provision since we came to office, or where we've significantly invested in new infrastructure in our country. The first trains came out of Leaving this morning on a new railway line built under SNP government. I was up in the northeast yesterday, the Aberdeen Western Peripheral route. We drove up that yesterday, promised by every government of every colour for 40 years, but delivered by the SNP in the northeast of Scotland, transforming the economy. So we can deliver, we can take the right decisions here in Scotland, but if the powers lie in Westminster, we're liable to get more of the standard of decision-making, if I can call it that, of austerity, Brexit and the cost of living, and we don't want that any longer. Now, on your point, Jess, about this gathering, well, this gathering was actually planned before the election was called. It was going to take place next Sunday, and what it was originally scheduled to be was the first opportunity for this wonderful party to see its new, fresh-faced young leader in front of it. But more importantly, to ask him questions, which we're going to come on to do in a little bit of time, because I promised I would make sure there would be effective internal democracy in this party, and that's what's just about to happen, or the first stage of it is about to happen. So folk can muck about with whatever terminology they want about what events are what and all the rest of it. This is a gathering of good, solid folk who want to work together to achieve success for the SNP and Scottish independence. It's lovely to see you all. Right, now, Dan Sanderson from Telegraph. Dan?
Thank you, First Minister. Don't you have a bit of a cheek to tell people to vote SNP to protect the NHS when just a few days ago we found out that waiting lists had spiralled to a record high? And also, those 690,000 people that are on waiting lists, why wouldn't they welcome more private sector investment if it meant actually getting seen quicker? Thank you.
Well, see, I suppose your question, Dan, is answered by West Streeting, because it all goes back to London. It's all about, so let's look at all this, right? We've passed on all the Barnett consequentials to the health service in Scotland that have come to us from the UK government. We've also, various ministers in the Cabinet and government, taken decisions over a number of years to ask people in Scotland, higher earners, to pay slightly more in taxation than they would pay if they were in the rest of the United Kingdom. And that's resulted in us now having £1.5 billion per annum more to spend on public services in Scotland, which a large proportion of which is going into the National Health Service. So we're actually taking the hard decisions to expand health expenditure because we recognise it's necessary. We're passing on all that's coming to us from the Westminster government, but it's not addressing the needs of people because of austerity. So to me, that's the answer to your question, Dan. It's all about recognising that austerity is now punishing us, and it's a programme that's been inflicted on Scotland by a United Kingdom government, and we've got to bring that to an end. And I fear, from all that I'm hearing from the Labour Party, is that austerity will not just be continued, the Labour Party is going to put austerity on steroids, and that's damaging for Scotland. Right, the last question is from Lucy Dunn from The Spectator. Lucy.
Thanks, John. Just one quick question. Is Nicola Sturgeon a help or hindrance to the SNP election campaign?
Well, I very much welcome Nicola's participation in the election campaign. She was out with Anne McLaughlin in Glasgow North East yesterday, and I know from the feedback I've had, she got a great welcome from members of the public, and she's a campaigner that's